So today, we're here to talk about powering innovation with the democratization of technology across industries. So I have a stellar cast similar to the film. I have, in order of appearance, I have Bobby Abraham, Global VP of Architecture, Change and Transformation at AstraZeneca. We have Dinah Rodriguez, Global Business Solutions Director at Pladis Global. And then we have the lovely Mark McCluskey, Director of Architecture, Analysis. And
First time I've ever been called lovely.
Oh, yeah, you are lovely indeed. Take the plaudits when you get them. Yeah? The Director of Architecture, Analysis and Design at 3. And last but not least, we have Teresa Wu, VP of Software Engineering at JP Morgan and Chase, who's had a long trip here, so we have to be gentle with her, okay? So the brief guide for this session is, we know roughly 87% of executives believe that democratizing digital technologies to their workforce, to their teams, to the individuals will help them realize greater efficiencies, better productivity, and better user experiences. So we just want to explore that in terms of what does that actually look like across various industries, and what lessons can we learn from different deployments. So to kick this story off, what do we mean by the democratization of technology, and what does it mean for innovation? So I'm going to go from my right to my left. So Bobby, could you give us a brief understanding?
So what we've been doing at AstraZeneca over the last 5 years or so is just modernizing our approach to thinking of platforms and products, just bringing new narrative into the business. Where we were perhaps 5-7 years ago, it was a largely federated business in the $20 to $25 billion range in annual revenue. But we knew that we had a pipeline of drugs that were coming that would phenomenally increase our footprint and our top line. But our SG&A expenses were growing at the same time. So when you have top line and bottom line growing at the same line, your operating leverage is very, very minuscule. So we thought early, and all we've been doing is simplifying how we collect and capture information across all of our commercial and financial systems, and how do we build a data warehouse that we can really drive a lot of citizen development. When you think of colleagues in commercial or in finance, most people are fixated with an innovation in 1980s, which was Microsoft Excel. So people are still fixated about, I want to extract data and then I want to, massage it myself rather than trust the data coming off the source systems because they are the most accurate version of the truth, rather than you massaging the truth for cherry picking the data objects that look or make your market or region or your product or brand more feasible or commercially viable. So the democratization for us has been, how do we shift that from a centrally held data warehouse, one we own the products and the platforms, and continue to build new data objects and data stewarding. But then on the far right, how do you consume that information? And we've just simply put standard platforms, but also allowed for colleagues to build their own out of the same common data sets. So there's always one version of the truth, and essentially building opportunities for people to leverage what they already know out of building macros and things that are perhaps Microsoft Excel based. But can we do that on a visualization platform? And can you drive that level of citizen development and drive those communities? So that's where we are. I wouldn't say victory has happened or nirvana has been achieved, but I think that's the journey we're on. Because we invested in the basic foundations, we're now able to drive a lot of the citizen development, including predictive planning and forecasting as well.
Fantastic. And then, Diana, yeah.
So then for all companies, I don't think that particularly for Pladis, but for all of us, there is an urgency to get better and faster. And we need, from IT perspective, to allow this rapid growth. So we need to offer the right solutions at the right time. I'm not saying that always is the top of the solution, the most flashy one. We need to give the right ones. So then for democratization of IT is to bring people that is non-IT people to IT and bring IT to the business. So then people that face the issues, that face the challenges, that have the requirement, the idea, they can structure better. And always is not everything fit for all of us. Always we need some sort of personalization and some sort of technology what means for each one. So giving the end users the possibility to develop the right tools for them, if we do it in the proper way with the right guidelines and the right framework, that will unblock all the innovation in the companies. So one of the biggest things is, of course, data democratization. That is what you were mentioning, Bob. So then is one of the more challenges, but the easiest one and the first ones that companies can do, because the access to the information, to the data, is very powerful to take decisions. But also from applications perspective. So allow them to build their own app that makes sense, create the ecosystems for them, and allow them to talk each other. So that is for me democratization. It's an unblocker and a really powerful tool to bring innovation.
No, thank you very much for that. Over to Mark.
Well, I think these things, like anything, trends come and go, and this time it feels like this one is here to stay. I think this one could be the kind of the big future. So why do I say that? Well, if I think 20 years ago, whenever I was just starting out, coming off a graduate scheme in Ford, and you had small pockets of people who were in the business but effectively IT skilled, and they could use the quite user-unfriendly tools to model out materials forecasting but they were basically doing almost code in order to do that, and you had small pockets in the business. Then if you think the 10 years ago, with the idea of automating kind of swivel chair type activities, there was a set of tools that came around about then, and it opened it out to a few more sort of business folk rather than IT people, and it made it slightly more friendly. And then, so as you've got this kind of, the tools are getting better with each 10-year cycle, and the pool of people who are interested and have the inclination to do these sorts of things gets bigger and bigger. So if you think now, compared to 20 years ago, how many people were tech savvy in our business, they went to the systems department to get stuff done. Nowadays, they'd rather not talk to the systems department if they don't have to. They'd rather have a tool in front of them that allows them to possibly go too far in some of our minds, but at least they can basically do what they need and maybe go a bit further than we would like them to. It's important still for IT to put the guardrails in place and put some sort of secure kind of, don't let them do things that are dangerous to the company. But if you just think of the concept of everyone in the business being able to, to take a set of tools and try things, then you're bound to get more innovation, just basically on the critical mass of people who are doing it. So that's why I kind of think it's kind of like, it's one of those things that it kind of had a bit of a false dawn, bigger, 10 years ago, a bigger increment, and now it just feels like the tools have moved on and people's skills have moved on. So I think that's why it's kind of here to stay and will only get bigger. And I think we all have to adapt into that world which says we're not the only people who can do tech now. Everyone can do tech, but there are still some things that only kind of skilled IT professionals can do. Put the right tools in place, put the right guardrails in place, and some controls around what people can and can't do to protect the enterprise and to protect themselves in some cases.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Over to Teresa, right to the far end.
Hi, hello everyone. So in my opinion, to have democratization of technology in a team, in the tech team especially, is to make it accessible for everyone, of course. And how do we do that, right? Actually, I'm really glad to say in recent years, there's lots of push to build a team with dev experience, for example, or the DevOps or SRE, to actually encourage everyone to have easily accessible tools to make developer life easier. That's one part of it, to make this accessible for your dev team internally. And because myself, I work for the consumer banking and for the Chase application. So what it means for us is actually to bring IT to our customer, to our user. So if you actually think how Chase Bank operate in the US with lots of branches and lots of beautiful applications, and here in the UK, actually when we launch, we actually don't have any physical branch. We actually have to deliver our product and build in a way that is accessible to our user. So we have to kind of convince our user to use our application in a digital way. So to having this in mind, we build the product in a way that is accessible to everyone, design the product with all-inclusiveness in mind, lower the gender gap, for example. So all this in a way helps. So that's my understanding. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And I just think, just to wrap that up in terms of what the group has been talking about, giving users permission to play effectively in sandbox types environment, allow them to experiment with technology, allow them to become innovators, futurists, technologists is, I think, the general consensus is the right thing. Out of the panel, are there any practical examples of where you've actually sought out different groups of people that don't traditionally work in technology to come to the table and contribute? Any practical examples that you can share?
I can share a small story. So something that we've been actually working on recently is, for example, everyone probably have experience of how painful release can be, right? When you deliver a product and the whole release process and how much time it can consume when you are actually in the release process and you found a bug and you have to fix the bug while you're in a hurry to release something. And this process, when you found the bug and fix the bug and also find a version that is actually working, all this at the moment, I think it's down to the hand of developer. Product people just push you to actually fix it, but they don't have any involvement in how you fix it. The tool we're building, one of the innovation ideas we had in our team is to build the tools that enable way to roll out a smaller version of the application. It's, for example, for the front-end world, we have similar tools that you can build in a backend like a microservice, but in the front end, we did like similar things like a micro front end. That means for product people, they now have the power to pick a working version of a package, or library, or module, and they can have the decision together with engineer team to decide how to package a product and release them to the production.
Fantastic. Any more examples?
I think for me, I'd almost say it's the problem hasn't been finding people. The problem has almost been fighting them off, because the vendors of the technologies that enable business users to do it have got so smart at going straight to the business and saying, look at this thing and look how I can put the power in your hands, that they're coming to us almost with a fait accompli saying, this Adobe suite lets me to do this, which we've done a lot in the sort of campaigning area with the Adobe set, where we're going to be putting in the experience platform over the next 12 to 18 months. And if I look at Adobe, that's one example. Automation, another example. Automation Anywhere, those sorts of technologies, they come and they just, they've sold it to the business are bought in, they see that they can do all this stuff themselves, and they come to IT going, make it happen, we're ready. I think the one possibly where we've had a bit of a tougher sell, and I think that's just because so far they kind of see it as if we're trying to offload traditional IT work to them, is the sort of self-serve and generation of reports. So rather than us kind of, it used to be you put I want to report on these 10 things by this many customer sets, and then they'd sit and wait for that report to be produced and delivered into their inbox overnight. I think now we're saying, here's the data, you use it, you decide what you want to report on, over to you. And that angle is slightly more tricky for us, because I think it's a broader spread of people that we're having to kind of upskill in maybe the tools for them to be able to cut and slice the data, because it's not Excel anymore.
Sure. And Diana, I know you want to come in there.
Yes, I'm working right now in 2 projects that is being delivered. One is going live in December the 5th. So one is for finance and another one is for research and development of the company. So there are SaaS applications, and then all the SaaS applications have the bulk of the application is blocked for us, is belong to the owner. But they always leave some configuration up front where you can play as a company and put your own things and make the user experience for the company. So in Pladis, the team that are going to configure is from business, not from IT. I'm there, and IT is in there to guide them, to be with them, to teach best practices, to make sure that everything is keeping a line and that will not convert in a monster so difficult to admin. But the full team is from business. That's it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that is just bringing them and saying, hey, you have your day-to-day job, but then come and be responsible of this. It's a good experience.
Isn't that fantastic? And Bob, do you have any practical examples?
I think I agree with everything that was said. Just key one for us was building in-house capability. I like, Mark, what you said, which is the business are being constantly bombarded with new technologies, new partnerships, new conversations, and rightly so, that you go to events like this and meet a new partner. I represent the business, less IT. And therefore, having that clarity of roles, where does IT start and where does it end? But at the same time, where does the business really drive value out of any initiative? And you almost think of it as, not just a good example, but also some of the barriers that we typically have in the business working with IT is very much around vocabulary. The conversation in the business is always, for us, number one, patient. Number two is driven by purpose, and number three, driven by people. But the language in IT is two other P's, which is platforms and products. So how do you bring these 5 P's together? And to us, that's where we've been building capabilities on both sides. It's not to say that the future will only exist where one party exists. No, it's how do you drive the collaboration between business and technology so that these 5 P's around our patient, around purpose, around people, around products, around our platforms, truly integrate, because that's the workforce we work with. You think of the generation today who are, active on TikTok or new technologies that are so driven by better user interfaces. That's the workforce of the future. I mean, we're going to scare them if they come into archaic organizations with clunky systems and clunky UI, UX. Yeah. So I think that's where the journey is. It's not that it's beginning now, but it has been a evolution rather than a revolution. Yes. So that's where I think those are live examples for us.
Excellent stuff. And I can testify to that. Language is a major barrier for engaging the entire workforce. Another one is trust. I've found, particularly in the NHS, we've got the largest workforce in possibly Europe. Nurses are everywhere, but they only really use them for UAT testing. And then when techies ask them via messaging, can you come in, share your ideas, they run for the hills, the acronyms they don't understand, the whole environment is foreign to them. So I'm a big fan of low-code, no-code type solutions, sandbox environments. Just thinking out loud in terms of other barriers outside of the ones that Bobby has shared that you've faced. So Teresa, any other barriers that we can discuss, and how have you managed to overcome them so that you can drive forward democratization?
Yeah, so I think this varies from team to team and from the different industry and also size of the team. For smaller companies, the barriers might come from the decision of the leadership team, how they actually support and push innovation going. For a medium-sized team, maybe the barriers comes from the resistance. For example, what I noticed when I worked in a medium-sized team is when the leadership team or when the innovation happens, there's actually resistance in the dev team, in the engineer team themselves. Be scared of get out of the comfort zone, be scared of making changes. It's actually true. Although we say every day we wanted to hug, to be welcome to change, but when it actually comes, when it happens, I see the resistance. For a larger company, the barriers might be like the gap between skills between skill sets because, again, it's because the size of the firm, it's really hard to leverage and hard to define what is actually the right piece of innovation we should all go for.
Fantastic, fantastic. Then over to you, Mark.
So I think the way we've overcome in one area, the way we've overcome the kind of skills shortage is to put a bureau concept in place. And at first, kind of first contact with the bureau is probably you're asking them to do something for you. But actually, that's what you think you're going to get. What you're actually going to get is you're going to get a little bit of being shown how to do it for yourself. And then hopefully next time that you need to do it, you won't come to the bureau, you'll just know how to do it for yourself. You might still come and get a bit of support. So it's almost like putting in place a coaching and a teaching capability rather than a submit a request or a ticket and wait 2 days to get the answer. And our users are actually finding that kind of a little bit more, they're more encouraged by that because then it allows them, they see it. The win for them is they see it as being able to do it themselves more quickly than waiting for an IT person to put it on a log and wait for a few days for them to get round to it. So we've got that one. Another barrier for us, which I don't think has been mentioned so far, is the getting across the concept of the business that in this case, whenever you've democratized it and you've given them the skills, if they do something that doesn't work, if they break something, there isn't a help desk to call in the same way that there is with traditional IT. Now, there'll still be IT colleagues there to support, and and as others have said, that continuum between business and IT has kind of disappeared, to a certain extent. You wouldn't know the difference between an IT person and a business person in some cases. But that idea of you break it, you fix it, and getting that sort of responsibility across to a business user. Now, the challenge is I think one thing that IT people do bring is a logical thought process, and John last night was very logical in his thought process. I don't think that necessarily applies to every person, even in this room, right? It doesn't apply to every person naturally, but one thing that IT people generally have, and specifically people who are trying to fix issues, is they have a very logical thought process of how to maybe try something to make it better and problem solve and that. So getting that concept across, and because people are only thinking about the happy path and how easy it is to do this thing rather than what happens if it's slightly more complicated. How do I cope in that scenario?
Fantastic, fantastic. Diana?
I'm leading right now the innovation through low-code, no-code applications, platforms. This is quite exciting, but the biggest barrier is the fear to the failure. What if I do something and then my colleagues doesn't like it? They don't like what I do, or what if it fails and we spend a lot of money? So what will happen with me? I don't want to be called at 2 a.m. in the morning because my application didn't work. So these kind of things is the most difficult ones. The other day I was receiving a requirement about being agile, and then we have a solution already in place, but they don't like because it's not agile. I want be faster. So every time that I call IT, it's taking at least 1 week, and I said, brilliant, agile, low code, no code. And the first feedback was, oh no, we don't know if there's the best practices. What I meant with agile, Diana, is you buy an out-of-the-shelf solution that is already proven, and you plug in, like it's plug and play, and you plug it here, and that's it. So then do it in less than 5 days. So it's not like that. So we need to be careful, and we need to encourage people and say, don't worry, I'm with you in the process with these logical ways of working, with good partners in the vendor side, saying, hey, bring best practices, help us to understand how progress and what is the future of each application. And there's a bigger risk there when we're talking about bigger fears, and it's about shadow ITs. In my previous companies, I had a huge issue with shadow ITs. So then they were able to develop, but then since the fear is in there, so then they don't say anything. And I'm just developing for myself, and which at the end is a lot of cost. It's really heavy to admin. And they come back to IT saying, can you fix this? And I said, well, at the first place, I don't know that this exists. what does it mean? What are you trying to do with this? Is very difficult to admin. So we need to be careful with shadow ITs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And just before I bring Bobby back in, let's talk about fear very, very quickly. On a humanistic level, if we are innovators, fear is incumbent in what we do. It's an ever-present issue. But if you are breaking out of your team, anybody that has stepped into IT from a different environment, you got fear of failure amongst your colleagues, yeah? But also you got a fear of success. What if you innovate well? Are you doing yourself out of a job, literally? So you might find in certain industries, a major barrier of innovation is the fact that human resources are not engaged in the conversation to support staff to come up with innovative solutions to say, okay, fine, if you've now sapped yourself effectively with this innovation, you can go and do something more productive with your time. So over to you, Bobby. Is there anything that we can do to support the human experience of fear and success in the democratization?
I'd go back to what I referred to earlier, which was building capabilities. Now you add to that driving change management and then the culture in the organization. Technologies today are proven, they work, but as soon as the business consumes a new product or a platform, if the business had to say this is the best thing that happens since sliced bread, guess what? The next round of budgeting, there's almost a zero-based budgeting approach, and people are always concerned that they've got to deliver benefits because everyone's looking for that return on capital employed or invested. So for us, I would say we just go back to what is the culture that we want to drive, because this is co-creation and collaboration, and therefore we are happy to fail fast and we are happy to scale fast. So it's that balance. So the idea of fear is very much there, but if you're in an environment where the culture appreciates that you should experiment, you should find new ways, you should look for pathfinding technology. Yes, it comes with benefits, but the way we've approached it and I think most big pharma do this, all of our investments really get classed as license to operate. So you really take the inherent fear of driving incentives or driving benefits or efficiency or effectiveness, taking it out of the game. Then the conversation is, this is bare minimum investment for license to operate. So I'd go back to capabilities, change management, and culture that can actually help drive out this fear. And lastly, that you have the environment where you can scale fast or fail fast, and that's fine.
No, excellent point. So as we move to turning our workforce into technologists, futurists, we should be brave enough to welcome new capabilities as well as new roles that will emerge as a byproduct of the innovation. Just moving over to the last point, then we're going to have a Q&A session. Okay, this is how we're utilizing technology in our teams to make day-to-day business decisions.
So in 3, we have obviously the consumer market that everyone knows about. You know, you pick your mobile phone, you pick your network. But we also have the B2B arm of the business. And how that operates is somewhat different because there it's basically it's a field sales model. So you've got 2 teams of salespeople out across the country going to enterprise. And one of the things that where we've democratized it and put the tools in the hands of the business is really the use of Salesforce. And as everyone knows, Salesforce has a lot of configuration options. That's completely in the hands of the business department, except whenever they need a new module, for example, that has to be built into the architecture. But in terms of use of the modules that they have, they can tweak, they can change processes, they can change configurations based on what the customer needs and what the deal needs in front of them. Now this has caused us a little problem because occasionally they change configurations that actually then behind the scenes the configuration hooks into an integration which hooks into something else, and you know they've changed it in ways that actually break the end-to-end cycle, so we've had to tread a bit carefully. But Salesforce is a good example where our field sales team are using that technology. We have automation technologies, which the threat of someone doing themselves out of a job, we aren't really in that space because we've got so many people that are kind of overworked with, the amount of things that we have to do, a bit of manual processes here and there. So actually it's a land of opportunity for us to get back to people doing just what they're meant to be doing rather than over and above. They're not really that worried about kind of doing themselves out of a job and making themselves redundant in that way. And then I think, I've mentioned it before, but the other one is putting the reporting capability and the data manipulation capability in the hands of the users with Tableau and Alteryx rather than in the past asking the IT department for another 100 reports that they want them faster than ever.
Fantastic. Diana?
I think that we have to tackle the thing from two angles. From technology point of view, there are some accelerators that you can use. For example, moving the applications to cloud solutions and then allow them to native connection and integration between them, because generally the users will need access to different applications rather than just one. So that is something that you can do. Use applications that allow and are easy to configure, like low-code, no-code, SaaS applications that they are for more user-friendly and non-IT people. And then also, you need to tackle the situation from the culture perspective and change the culture of your company. So from that angle, always is a good idea to start small. Don't launch those big projects that change massively. Is just pick the ones where you can partnership with your business, where you have strong vendors that can support you, and start there, creating the community of practice. Start with 1 or 2 projects that you can show and say, hey, it's fine, this is the learning, the lessons learned, what can do better, what we have done grown. So then in that way, your technology is ready when your community, IT and business, are ready as well for this.
No, thank you. That's a brilliant explanation. And Bobby, can you bring it home, the final comment before we put it out to the Q&A session?
Yeah, bringing it home for me is just the business perspective on change management. We've been doing 2 large restructuring initiatives in the organization. Number one is our manufacturing around the world. We've got 27 manufacturing sites around the world, and you think of each one of them and assume that large pharma does data management, data stewarding really well. And guess what? That's not the case. So we've been defining data quality standards and what we want to drive in ultimately improving the cost of goods sold. So manufacturing accounting program is the program that really delivers standard product costing and actual product costing. Now that's a real value to the business, but it's also real value to the ultimate patient, because what you're trying to do is deliver the best outcomes for patients, and therefore price is a big component of that. Volume and price is essentially what the business is after. So bringing it home for me is really, where does technology and the business come together to collaborate and co-create? And you drive that and point that towards value, because when you can demonstrate business value, you can get the big buy-in from the business, you can get the buy-in from technology. The second one for me is around clinical trials. Organizations like ourselves, we spend billions of dollars in clinical trials every single year. And essentially, these are 7, 10, 12-year programs. So how do you manage your accruals of clinical trials? How do you get better profitability out of these trials? So putting accrual management platforms in. Again, it talks to the heart of the business. So I would just bring it home as in everything that we're doing between the business and technology, if it's aligned to the bigger purpose, you will get the people buy-in, and therefore products and platforms become natural vocabulary in the business.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess the value is our true north, our North Star. So I'm just going to put it out. Great panel guests. Can we just go a quick round of applause for the panelists?